All right, welcome back to another video in the complete web dev series. We're taking you from beginner to job ready in this series. Well, at least that's my goal, and it's going to be up to you to help make that happen. So we are in the middle of the chapter where we're building a content management system, and we are using object-oriented programming as a style of programming, and then we're using a design pattern called MVC, Model View Controller. And so right now it does seem like we're doing a lot of extra complicated things to do something that you can do very easily with procedural programming. But I promise you that once we get through this, you're going to have a framework of sorts that you can use on other projects and quickly build out a lot of your future projects with. And that's the power of object-oriented programming, is being able to share code or reuse code in a very modular and streamlined way. And so what we're doing in this video is we're going to complete the validators. So we're going to add a few more validators that we can use for form validation, and we're going to continue to use the register form as a test subject for that. We may not keep some of these validators in our actual project, but I thought they would be useful, and they're pretty easy to do. So let me go ahead and switch over to my screen here. And let's create a new branch. We are on video 23. So I'm going to do a get checkout -b to create a new branch, and I'm going to call it v23. The next thing that I'm going to do here is push this up to GitHub so that you guys can have access to it. So I'm going to do git push set upstream, and it's going to be set to origin v23. So it'll have the same name, the same branch name on GitHub as it does on my local machine. So I'm going to hit enter there, and now we are set up and ready to go. So if I switch over to the project here, we are in this auth controller, and we left off with being able to click save and have some required validators going, and then we also had an email validator to where if we put some randomness here and hit save, well, right here this is giving us the this is actually an HTML5 error that it gave us there. But if we go to inspect, we can disable that. And this is the reason that you don't want to really rely on front-end validation, because I can just change this type right here to text in this editor. And now it passes the front-end validation. But because we have that email validation on the back, it does not pass the back-end validation. So the back-end validation is a safer way to validate your forms, and it's nice to have front-end validation, but it's always better to do most of your validation on the back end, or to do it on the back end at a very minimal. And if you want to add extra user experience, you can do it on the front end as well. Okay, so that's where we left off, and one thing that I didn't like last video is that we are getting this password. So when we post here, this password is taking the empty password and actually hashing that. And this is actually the hashed password that we would save to the database, but that's not what we want to do here. So what I think we're going to do just for now is go to the register.php, and inside the password and confirm password input blocks, we're just going to set the values of those. So get rid of this and just set those to an empty string. That way it's not reading from the user, and they'll have to retype in the password every time. And I'm okay with that because that's pretty standard. So now if I hit save, we'll get that these are required, but we're not getting the hashed password here. The next thing that we want to do here is let's go ahead and let's see, hit that again. Okay. So now what I want to be able to do is take these, and we're just going to add a few more things to it. For example, we may want the password to have a minimum number of characters. So let's go ahead and do that validator now. If you look at the go to core validators, these are our list of validators that we've already created. Let's go ahead and create a new one. So create a new file in that validators directory there, and we're just going to call this min validator, just like that. And .php, we'll hit enter, and now this is going to open up a new file here, and this new file, what we're gonna do is open some PHP tags. Now remember, on our classes we don't close the PHP tags, so make sure that you don't. And then the first thing that we must do if we're going to use namespacing is we have to put the namespace first in this file. So we're going to go ahead and namespace that just like this, and it's going to be core validators. That is the namespace of this validator. The next thing that we want to do is we want to include or use our parent validator, which was an abstract class that we created. Now this abstract class is going to have the constructor and the properties kind of built in that all of these validators need, so we don't have to redo any of this logic. But it also is going to require us to include a run validation method inside of our child classes. Now this run validation method must return a boolean of true or false. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say use core validators, and then we'll do validator. Now this is our parent class right here, so let's go ahead and create the class. So we'll say class min validator, and that is going to extend the validator class. Now right off the bat, we're going to have some red squigglies, because if you hover over that, the red squigglies are happening because we haven't implemented our run validation, and that is because this abstract class that we're extending has an abstract function, and this says, hey, your children need to implement this. So until we do that, we're going to have an error, and in fact that would kill the application. So let's go ahead and add that. So I'm going to give it a space here, and we just need to add public function run validation, just like this. Now you can see those red squigglies went away because we are implementing this even though we're not doing anything with it. Let's go ahead and get our value. Now this is just like any other time. We are going to say this underscore object. Now remember, this underscore object is inherited from the parent class right here. So we have access to this because in the constructor, we are taking, in our case, the model and setting it to that property. So now we have access to the model. So what are we looking for in the model? Well, we're going to look for a property in the model. In this case, you know, you could do something like password, but we need that to be a variable. So instead, what we're going to do is use curly brackets right here, and we're going to say this field. And so this will work for any field that we pass in here. And the way that we do that is inside of our, let me go to the users model here. Inside of our validators, we require that we pass in the field that we're validating. So that is part of the parameters that are passed into the validators. So let's go ahead now and go back to the min validator. So now we have our value. We just need to give it, we need to check. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say, hey, does stringlen. Now stringlen is a built-in PHP function that will get us the length. So string length of value is going to be the number of characters in this value. So it could be, you know, if it's just 2 characters, that string length is going to return 2. So we want to make sure that that is greater than or equal to this rule. And the rule, the rule, one second, I need to answer something really quick. Let me just pause the video and I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. So we're going to pass as this rule. Now remember, inside of our validator class, we are looking for a key, and I'm sorry, my air conditioner is going to kick on here. Sorry about that. It is hot in here though, so I'm going to let it run. This params here will take the key and look for a rule, and if it's set in there, then we're going to have access to that because we're going to set this rule equals. So this min validator will also have access to this rule because this is actually the class that's going to be instantiated. It's just going to get inherited with it, the constructor from the parent. Okay, along with all the properties. Okay, so then this is very simple. Then all we're going to do after we've done that is just return if it passes or not. So this pass right here is going to be a boolean because we're checking if the string length is greater than or equal to the rule. And that would be the minimum. The rule is going to be the minimum. So if we put the rule as 2 and this is a string length of 1, it's not going to be greater than, so this is going to fail this run validation. So let's test that out now. Let's go over to our users and let's just write here, well, let's do it down here with our passwords. What we're going to need to do first though is require it up here. So let's do min validator, like that, and that will include our minimum validator. And then down here in this is new, we're going to add a new one here, and we'll say this run validation, and then we're going to build the new validator. So we'll say new min validator, and then what's going to happen is in this validator we're going to pass as the first parameter the keyword this. Now this just passes in the user model to this. So that's what's happening there, and then we're going to give it an array. So this array is going to take a field, and this field is going to be password, and then we're going to go ahead and give this a rule, and the rule for this, the minimum, let's just go ahead and make the minimum 8, okay? And then we're going to give it a message in case it fails that validation. The message will be returned to the front end. And let's give it a message of password must be at least 8 characters. Okay? So let's go ahead and save that now, and let's go back here to our register form, and I'm just going to type a couple letters in here, just 3, and now you can see that we no longer get the requirement error, but instead we get the password must be at least 8 characters. So then if we type in a valid password and hit save, now you can see that that has validated to true, and we no longer have an error message there. Okay, so that's good news. So now, since we've done the minimum validator, the maximum validator is very, very simple. So let me show you how we're going to do that. Go to your validators directory here and right click on it. Create a new file and call it max validator.php. And then what we'll do is go to your minimum validator and just copy everything in there. Control C that. Go back to your max validator and Control V, and then just change the name of this to max. And then this is going to be the exact same, except for we're going to check if the string length is less than or equal to the rule. Okay, so if it's less than or equal to the rule, then it will be the maximum. So the rule in this case will be the max that we're passing in. So then let's try that. Let's go ahead and save that, and we'll go back to the users model here, and let's just go up here. We're going to include this in max validator, and just to test this, let's just let's do this run validation, and then we're going to pass in new max validator. Give that a semicolon there before I forget. First parameter is going to be the object. So in this case, in this context, we're passing in the user's object, so it's just going to be the keyword this. And then we're going to give it a parameter array here, and that will take a field, and we want to give it the field of password. And then to test this, let's just give this a rule, and let's just make it a maximum of 10 characters. So it'll have to be between 8 and 10 characters based upon these two minimum and maximum validators. So then what we're going to do is just go ahead and give it a message, and then the message here will be password must be a maximum of 10 characters. Okay, that will be our message. Now, I don't think we're going to keep this. We're just going to test it using this form that we already have here, so that if you need to use it on future forms, you'll have that minimum and maximum validator. Just go ahead and enter here, and then let's go ahead and type in the minimum, and this should pass the maximum as well. So we'll hit save and we don't have any errors. But now I'm going to put a password that's longer than 10 characters here. And now it says password must be a maximum of 10 characters because I had too many characters there. Again, if it's between that 8 and 10, it should pass. So now it's using both of those validators to check that password. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that maximum validator because just inside this model, because I don't really want that here. And we'll save that. So we can close the minimum and the max validators. Another super simple one that we're going to do is just numeric. And this is going to be another very easy validator. You can see that most of these validators are very easy. You just need to implement you just need to be able to implement the numeric validator.php. We'll give that the name. You just need to implement the abstract class, or extend the abstract class rather, and it will go ahead and, I mean, you can just return true or false, and literally that's build whatever you want as long as it's called run validation, because that's the method that we have to implement. And then just make sure it returns true or false, and then you have access to the value, the rule, the field, the message, and all of that right there in the validator. Okay, so now what I'd like to be able to do, we need to namespace this, and we're going to namespace this core \validators, and then we're going to use our core validators validator class, which is our abstract class that we're extending. And then we're going to define the class, and this class is going to be numeric validator, and that is going to extend our abstract class of validator. Now, because we don't have the run validation function, this is going to give us an error. So let's go ahead and implement that really quick. So we just have to give it a public function run validation method, and even though it doesn't do anything, it now passes the abstract implementation here. So that here what we're going to do is do the same thing where we say value is equal to this object, and we'll use a variable here to get the field, just like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set pass equal to true by default, and then we're only going to check this if it's not empty. So we're going to say if not empty value, like this. Then what we're going to do here is say pass is equal to, now we can just use a PHP function here that's called isNumeric, and we'll pass value in there like that. And then underneath here, the last thing we do is return pass. Now, so it starts out, oops, I forgot my caret there, or my greater than sign. So we got this object, and then it gets the property based upon the field. Now remember, we're passing that in here underneath this field. So that is going to be fname, lname, email, or whatever we pass in here as the field is what's going to be used here in this variable. And so it'll be like this first fname, this password, this whatever. So that's the value. Then we're just going to by default set it to true so that it passes if it's empty. And then only if the value is not empty, we're going to check it. That way this can run even, and it's only going to check if it's numeric if it's not empty. Because we might want to use this with an optional field, and we only want to check it if it's got a value. And then we're just using a PHP function that already returns a Boolean. So then we're setting this to that. And then we're just returning that value there. So that's going to return true or false. So let's test that out really quick. Let's just throw that in up here. We'll get rid of it. So we'll replace this max validator right here with numeric validator. And then let's run that right here. So we'll do this run validation, and then we're going to pass in our instantiated object. So new numeric validator. We'll go ahead and give that semicolon. The first parameter this takes is the object, so in this context it's going to be this, and then it takes a parameter, so we have to give it field, and in this case let's just give it an fname, Oops, I gotta put that in some quotes there. F name. And it doesn't need a rule, but it does need a message. So let's go ahead and give this a message. And it says, let's just say field must be numeric. Now this, we're not going to keep this, we're just testing this here. So I'm going to save that and we'll go back here and refresh. And if I, oops, we have a problem. Sorry about that. Hit save. Now it says that this is a required field, but if I put in a string here and hit save, it'll say that the field must be numeric. So let me go ahead and put a numeric value here, so like 1, 2, 3, and hit save. And now you can see that that passes. So it has to be a numeric value for that to pass. So that's what that validator does, but we're not going to use that obviously on the first name. So I'm going to get rid of that here. And then we're going to build our last validator, which is going to be the most complex of them all, but we're actually going to use it. And that is because we want to check the email and make sure that it's unique in our database. So we want it to be unique in this user's database. So let's go ahead now and start working on that. And this one is going to be a little complex, okay? But just bear with me and we'll get through it. So I'm going to close down the numeric validator, and let's just right click on validators and create a new file. And this is going to be called unique validator.php. And go ahead and open up some PHP tags, and then we're going to give it its namespace. So of course it's just core validators. That's the namespace, and then we're going to use the core validators validator class. The other thing that we're going to use here is well, I guess we don't need to do that. So let's go ahead and define the class here. So this was unique, and make sure that it's uppercase. Unique, the uppercase U and V. Unique validator, and that's going to extend the validator class. Now we're going to get red squigglies here. And why are we, what's going on here? Core, oh, I misspelled this. Validators. And now we get, the whole thing is a squiggly because we haven't implemented the run validation yet. So we're going to add the run validation method. Now ultimately this needs to return true or false. Public, oops, I forgot the function. There we go. Public function run validation. And so let's go through here and let's just start building this out. The first thing we're going to do is, just like every other time, we're going to grab the value from our model here. So we're going to say this underscore object, which is our model class, so it'll be users in this case. And then we're getting the field, so we're going to use a variable on that. And again, we're going to use this field. So now we have our value given to us. The next thing that we want to do is we want to say, hey, if value is equal to an empty string or not is set value, then what we're going to do is just return true. And what this allows it to do, again, is make this an optional thing. So we don't want to check, we don't want to do a database check if they haven't passed in a value to begin with, okay? The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start building up some conditions, because we're actually going to do a database call. And so for the conditions, this is going to be equal to, and we're going to use double quotes here because I'm going to use string literals, and we're going to say this field. So in this case, you know, it's going to be email will be the field that we're going to use, but you can use this for anything. And we're going to see if that's equal to, and then we're going to put in the bind thing here, and again it's just going to be this field. Okay, so this will end up looking like email is equal to colon email. And then what we're going to do is build up our binds. So we're going to say bind is equal, and it's going to be an array. It's going to be, let's see, bind is equal to an array, and we're going to give this a key of this field, and that is going to be equal to the value. Okay, so now that we have the conditions and the bind, what we can do, we're going to go ahead and build up query params, and that gets an array here. And remember, we can just pass in conditions, and we're going to give that the conditions variable that we created, and we also need to pass in bind here, and we'll give that the bind array that we just created right here. Now the other thing is we need to know if it exists. So let's just do exists, and we're going to say, hey, this. Now remember, our object is going to be the model object. So in our case, it's the user's object. So we have access to running the find first method right on that. So we're going to do a find first, and we're just going to pass in the query params, just like that. And then what we're going to do is, if this returns something, we want to return it if it returns true or false. So exist, if it's true, it's going to find that object. And so what we actually want to return here is the negative. So we're going to use the not, or the false there, or negated, exists. Just like that. So if this is false, that's good. So this will actually negate that and turn that into a true. Because we want the unique, we want to find this, but if it's a pass validation, we need to make sure there's not an object in the database like this. The other thing is, this right here isn't complete. This will work for the new, so let's go ahead and test that real quick. And we're going to add more to this, but I want to show you what it does first of all. So right here, let's go to the top of the users thing. Let's just add in unique validator, like that. And then what we're going to do is, underneath the email field here, let's add the new one. We're going to say this run validation, and we want this to be new unique validator, like that. And then the object that's going to be passed in is this, so it's going to be the user object. And then we give it the field in the array here, and that will be email. And then the message is, we're just going to say a user with that email address already exists. We'll hit save. And I got a problem here, so I probably misspelled something. Unique validator. Let me go here. Unique. Let me copy that. Go back here. And I had another stinking typo in my namespace right there. You guys probably saw that. So what this is gonna do, and you know what, let's go to our unique validator, and we're just gonna slow down a little bit, and let's say use core H. And what we're gonna do here is let's just go through and put some dump and dies here. So H, D and D, and let's just dump and die value to get started. So we're going to go through this step by step, and I'm going to test the parhamcurtis@mailinator.com, which I know is in my database because I got it right here. And if I hit save, you can see that the value that we're getting is this email address, so we know that the value is correct. All right, so let's move this dump and die down some, and let's just put it beneath this query params, and let's go ahead and look at what those query params look like. Query params, and we'll refresh that, and now you get our an array with 2 elements, and we have conditions, and that's equal to email is equal to, and then it's going to bind onto this right here. And then our bind is an array with 1 element, and we have a key called email, and then we're passing that value into that bind right there. So that will avoid SQL injection. Now let's go and see what we get here with our exist. So here, exists, we'll hit save, and now if we refresh, you get the user model back, and it's actually getting the whole model of that user with that email address right here. So you can see that there is one already in the database. And because of that, this is not going to be false, this is going to be true. And so it's going to do the reverse of that. So since it is true, it's going to return false, because run validation needs to be false if it fails and true if it succeeds. So we want it to be empty here. That's why we're using this negative right here. Let's go ahead and test this now with an email address that does not exist in the database. So let me go back here, and I'm going to just put in parhamtony@mailinator.com, and we'll hit save. And now you can see that this passes because this is not found in the database. So the unique validator is working now. It's actually doing a lookup in the database using our find first method in our model. So and if you get any errors there, you may have an error in your find first method in your model, so you'll probably need to check through that. Let me get a drink here real quick. All right, excuse me. But the problem is this validator as it is now will only work if we're checking for new entries. What were to happen if we were to use this as an update form and we had the same email address in here? Well, the problem is that this email address would show up and it would fail validation every time, so we wouldn't effectively be able to update this. So you get that. So if I update, this already exists in the database, and I don't care if it's actually unique. I just want to check that there's no other things. So what we need to do is just check for that, and we're going to do that right here underneath our conditions and binds. We're going to, let's put a comment here. We're going to say check updating record, and this is going to be very simple. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say if not empty, this object ID. Okay, just like that. We could either do it that way, or we can use our, we have a method on our model called isNew. So let's try that. Let's just say if not this object is new. That's going to do the same thing. So if it's not new, this means this is possibly an update record. And so what we're going to be able to do here is we're going to add on to our conditions, and we're going to do a concat equals to add something to the end, and we're going to say and ID does not equal ID, and we'll bind that up. We'll use a prepared statement with this right here as a key, and then we need to add it to the bind. So we'll say bind ID is equal to, and in this case, it's going to be this object ID. So now if we go back and we put this here, and let's do this, and let's do query params right here. We hit save. Now, if I have, I'm going to put back parham curves because I know I have that one in my database. We'll hit save, and you can see that it's not added to the conditions here. But remember, we can actually use this to edit as well by adding a parameter here. And what I'm going to do is add the ID of this user. So it was 3. So we're going to say /3 and hit enter. Now it takes us here and it automatically loads in our values from the database. But now if I hit save, now you can see that the conditions say, hey, is there an email address that matches this in a database and the ID is not equal to the current ID that I'm on? So the email address then gets bind here and the ID is 3. So it's going to find it. What it's doing is trying to find a record that is the same email address and has a different ID. If that's the case, there's another user. Say we were trying to update our email address. If we go here and we're trying to update this email address to something that already exists in our database, we want that to fail. But if we're trying to update something else, we want this to succeed, right? So that's how that's going to work. I'm not actually going to save that though, but what we can do is just show you that if I didn't do that, let's go ahead and comment this out. And I'm going to take away the code that we just added by commenting out that code. And now if we hit save here, it says a user with that email address already exists. So this is kind of a bug. I want to be able to update this user because I'm intending to update this user. See, I'm getting the user by the ID right there. So we need to have this code. And if we do that, then we could say, and now it passes, okay? I hope I didn't break my... it did break my thing. That's okay, we'll fix it. All right, so that is the unique validator. Now there's one more thing that we want to be able to do, and this is the complex part of it a little bit. We may want to check something else is unique besides the email and the ID. In fact, we may say, hey, I want to check that it's unique among the email and the last name, something like that. That might be, or it might do ACL. Find me, is there a user with parmcurtis at validator.com that has the admin ACL? So the way that we can do that is pretty simple. And let's go ahead and do that right now. And I'm gonna put a comment that says this allows you to check multiple fields for unique. So all these will have to exist in order for it to fail validation. You could also use this for checking unique with soft deleted rows, okay? That's another reason you would do this. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna say for each, and we're gonna utilize this additional field data. Now that'll be an array, and we'll say as adds. I don't know, I can't think of another word right now, but this is just an added field right here, and I don't want to call it field. So this additional field data as adds. And what we're going to do is for each one of those, we're going to add on to the conditions array by doing dot equals, and we'll do a space, and we'll say and then we'll just say adds is equal to, and then we will do a string literal again, adds. So that will build up the conditions, the where clause there. And then what we'll do is add to our bind. So we'll say bind, and we'll put the adds here. And we're going to say is equal to this object. And then we'll use adds like that. Okay. So now if we uncomment this and we go back to users, the way that this would work is instead of just passing a string in as field, we can make this an array. Now the first element in that array needs to be the most important one. So that's the regular email one. But then I'm going to do a comma, and we can do ACL like that. Okay. We can also do L name. So we can do as many of these as we want in there. And now if we go back, let's go back to our form here, and I'm going to hit save, and we should get a dump and die. And now you can look at our conditions array, and it says, hey, email is equal to email. So that'll get bound on. And ID is not equal to ID because we are updating this. And ACL is equal to ACL, and LName is equal to LName. So we can add as many of those fields on here using an array syntax with our field like this instead of a string. So remember, if we use a string, it's just going to check the email, and if it's an update, it'll automatically add the ID. But for the rest of these are just additional fields we're passing in as an array. So then we can look, and what it does is then it builds out the bind array, and it takes whatever value we have set already in the ACL for here, and it sets it to admin. It sets it to parham. So you can see that this will work exactly how we want it to work. So that is the unique validator. I hope you enjoyed this, because this is a little complicated. Let me know in the comments if you're tracking, if you understand, if I'm doing a good job explaining this. But basically, this might take a little practice using, but this is really cool. Now we're not using this core anymore, so we can just get rid of that, or the H class right there. And that's it. We're done with our validators. Let me see what time it is, or how much time I've spent on the video. So this video is getting kind of long. It's about at 40 minutes right now. But I do want to go ahead and just really quickly run through the code on this model to make sure you understand why these validators are first being triggered and run, and then how these validators are being built, okay? Because I went through it a little fast. Now I just want to take it one step back and just double check that you understand what's going on here. So let's go ahead and look quickly at our auth controller. What happens in our auth controller is that if there is posted data, then we are assigning those values to our user object, okay? Then at the end of this, we're going to say user save. Excuse me. Now, if you look at the user save, that actually comes from the model class, and we have a save method on here. So let me find that real quick. It's right here, and so it calls this method on our object that we're using in our form. Then what it does is, the first thing it does is it calls this before save. Now this is the first thing that happens before it actually tries to do the save. Oops. It actually tries to do the save. It runs this before save. So what we've done is, in our model for users, is we have created the before save method. So this will get called every time we run the save method, and it happens before it tries to save it to the database. So the first thing that we're going to do here is run our timestamps function that populates this timestamps. And then what we're going to do is we are going to set up these run validations. Now these validations, if you look, these also come from the model. So if I search for run validation, we have a run validation method in our model, and all this does is it accepts a validator. Now this is an instantiated validator, and it runs the run validation method on there, and then it knows if it passes or not based upon that thing. So every single time it runs a line of code here, it is running that validator, and then we're passing in, and we're doing it all in one line, which kind of looks crazy, but we're passing in an instantiated validator right into this run validation method on the model. If it fails, we're going to set validation pass to false on the model so that we know not to save it, because if you go back to the save method, it checks to see if validation pass is true before it saves to the database. Then we're going to append onto the errors array the field from the validator, okay? So it could be first fname, lname, email, or whatever. And then we're going to set that equal to the message. The message is what we set up here. This is our field. If it fails, it's going to set this message equal to whatever's in here. And then the way that that's working, let's just look at that run require validator. So all the validators are going to extend the parent class validator. Now this is an abstract class. The reason we made it an abstract class is we wanted to ensure that all of our validators had this run validation, because in our model this requires that our validators has that method. Okay, so if we didn't have that method, this would break, and we'd be like, why did this break? Well, it's because it didn't have that run validation. So we used an abstract class to ensure that there is a run validation class here. Then what we did is we set up all the properties and the constructor that those validators are going to need, because they're all going to do the same thing. So we don't want to retype this in all of our validators. So that made our validators super simple, other than our unique validator. And they ended up looking something like this, where we could extend our validator class. And now all those properties and the constructor exist here because it inherits it from this validator. But because that's an abstract class, it ensures that we have this function run validation. And then all we're doing is returning true or false. So we're doing some sort of test, and we're running true or false on it. So that's it. We built out all of our validators to return true or false from this run validation function. And then we use those in our model here. And so if it's new, it's going to check the password and the confirm password. If not, then it's just going to run everything. Okay, well, regardless, it's going to run all these, and only if it's new will it run these right here. Okay, so I think in the next video, what we're going to do is we're just going to finish up our register form. Now that we have all these validators done and we have form validation done, we just need to clean up a few more things. It's really close to being done, but we need to clean up a few more things with saving new versus updating users in that register form right here. So if I go here, this is what I'm talking about. Alright, so that's it for this video, guys. I hope you're enjoying. Please comment, like, subscribe. You can check out freeskills.life if you want some merch. If you do get some merch, take a picture and send it to me. If you want some free merch, I'm considering handing out some free merch. Throw me a comment, tell me you want some in the comment section below. And then that's it, guys. Hope you're having fun. Bye.